Welcome to a podcast by Conquest, the youth ministries at Trinity Baptist Church, Manhattan, New York. Today we are having a conversation with Rahsaan entitled Poise and Integrity on Conduct During Difficult Conversations. Rahsaan is the Sector Director for Child Protection and Education at World Vision USA. In this role, he provides strategic leadership and program and project management. Rahsaan brings more than 12 years of experience in school, community, and church-based programming focused on at-risk and vulnerable youth populations. In addition to his work for World Vision, Rahsaan has been a licensed pediatric occupational therapist for the past 16 years, and he is also a Conquest parent. We welcome you to join us now in the middle of the conversation as we are talking about consistency, the first point in a three-point talk on difficult conversations in youth ministry.
Relationship. And that allows you to go deep. That allows you to go much deeper, to journey with youth. That allows them to be able to know that they can trust you, be able to know that you care about them, and it's not just because you're here at the church, but you actually care about them. You know, many of the youth workers that we were working with, they were the person that the child called when they got in trouble. You know, they were the ones who ended up having to go down to the precinct, or they were the ones that had to go by the school and pick them up, and those types of things. And so how do you maintain that consistency in a child's life so that you establish authentic relationship, but also remembering that you're partnering with their parents to do so. So that can be important. One of the things we say there is do no harm. The deeper you go with kids, the more important it is for you to be authentic and consistent. Mm-hmm. Because if they take you to the dark places of their lives and you're not there, you're actually doing harm. And we talk about, how can you do that? And even in our work internationally with child protection, children who have been trafficked or for labor or for sex, in your good intentions, only go far enough where you can go, so that if you're absent for a particular part of time, that void that you've created, even if it's momentary, does not create harm, does not set that child back. I needed Rahsaan to be there and he wasn't. So you really have to know your youth well enough to know how far you can lean in, how far you're able to lean in professionally. To not feel like you have to be all things to all children, to know what your boundaries are as an individual, and then to know how to, I'm sorry, this keeps falling asleep.
Okay, you swipe up.
Oh, that's it? Okay. Yeah. And then to know how far you can go in partnering with their parents. One of the things you'll also find in this consistency is the ability to keep confidences. And even that. Professionally, I know that I'm a mandated reporter. There are certain things that if I hear, I don't care what the child wants, I have to report that to somebody. So, the first thing you learn is your kids are like, well, can you keep a secret? And it's like, well, that really, I got to be honest with you, really depends on what it is. Because I can't keep all secrets. There are certain things that, if I know you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else, I need to be able to tell that to people. So let's talk about some of that, and let's not have it be about keeping secrets, but let's have it being about what's the best way I can help you out through this situation. So just knowing those types of things, how far can you go into a conversation on sexuality or drug abuse or those types of things where you need to kind of call in some backup. All of those things are important to make sure that you're not doing any harm. And so that was the first thing I wanted to say just around the consistency. It's not just about, hey, I show up every Sunday, but it's really being able to discern what is the role you should be playing, how deep can you go into someone's stuff. One of the things I mentioned to Francesca when we were talking about, and I don't know if it's later in my notes here, but oh yeah, it is, so I'll wait till I get to that point. So any questions on the consistency piece?
I know you're saying about confidential stuff, but if it's in a group setting like this and we're youth leaders, can we share with each other or not really? Like, that's the thing I'm not sure about.
Yeah, so I'll defer that to Francisco. I think that you can, the first thing you always want to be aware of is, am I helping this person journey through something where it's not, where the person's safety or the safety of someone else is not at risk. The level of talking that you do among each other, That's up to you, and that can be a question that you ask the children. So it's like, is it okay if I talk to some of the other leaders about this? Maybe we can pray about it together. They can help me, and so you really want to try to honor confidences, and Francisco's got to trust his leaders to be able to say, hey, I'm working with Eliana a little bit on some issues around her sexuality. So far, everything is, I think she's really confiding in me, and so just keep it in prayer, and ultimately the spirit of discernment comes into play there as well, right? So I don't know, Francisco, if you want to add what you don't want to happen, especially when you're journeying with a kid through some tough stuff, is for them to feel like you have betrayed them in any way, and so I would err on the side of asking or saying I need to share this with somebody rather than just doing it without them knowing if they've asked you can you please not tell anybody about this? And you can tell by the topic and the relationship that you have that, I'm not being negligent, I'm not being reckless by not sharing this with Francisco. I can let Francisco know, hey, this is what I'm talking to her about. So far it's been pretty easy. If I feel like it's over my head, I'll let you know, but if you can trust me just to kind of keep the confidence that she's asked me to be in, and any guidance you want to give me, generally speaking, would be helpful, but it's kind of like, I got this one for now kind of thing. So that's the way that I would approach it. And I would trust, you trust your youth workers to kind of go through trainings and conversations so okay, if you're in this situation with a youth, this is the way that we as a team have agreed to go forward. And anything outside of this, let's talk about it. So Francisco, do you have anything you want to add?
I will say that there's this thin barrier between parents who want to have these conversations with each other and our youth as well, because they want to know that they're not alone. But then there's also the fear of actually finding out that they are alone if they share it. And that varies culturally also within our group. I mean, some families are happy to share and then include people and want to work on something as a team. Others prefer that if they share it with you, it's just for you to hear and not for you to do anything with. Just they needed someone to hear it, and they expect it not to go any further than you, and they don't expect for you or them to bring it up in conversation again. So it's something that in some ways you'll have to navigate, but for us, there are, I would say, we don't have a working policy around that as of right now. As far as okay, these specific things need to be escalated. Well, obviously some, like professionally you'd mentioned, if you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else, that should definitely be escalated to either myself and to the parents, if you hear that from a kid. Or if you hear that from a parent, then it's good to escalate it, or at least to tell them, this is something we should escalate. Do you need help with finding counseling? We should take that step, because it's no help to them for them to just share something that needs action, but for them the first action was being heard, and they may not be ready for the next step. So if it's something, and actually if you would share with us a couple of the things that if they are shared, we should definitely escalate. Let's say just we're youth workers, we have minors under our care. These things, if they're shared, should get to a next level, or should be escalated.
Yeah, and I don't even know that there's necessarily a set of those. I've always, the point I made earlier, I've always used the rule, and most youth workers use the rule of, if you're going to do anything to hurt yourself, which is self-abusive behavior, if you hear thoughts or conversations around that type of stuff, around suicide, any of those types of things, and even now if you hear stuff around, you lean in a little bit more around conversations around bullying or being bullied. Obviously, we know where that has gone most recently in a lot of our schools and stuff like that. And then if you start to hear behavior about things that they're going to do to others, a consistent theme around a specific individual or a specific teacher or their school or their principal and those types of things. And so I'm sorry, I don't know that I have anything. I kind of always look through that lens. Right? Anything else, if you feel like, an err on the side of conservative, like if it even makes you think that way, if in the context of authentic conversation, you can suspend judgment and shock, and we'll talk about that a little later, and dig a little deeper to see, okay, this kind of sounds like it could be. Let me find out exactly by asking some good questions, some probing questions, some help me understand, Eliana. Do and again, that comes from relationship, because as soon as you begin to question something you've heard, kids can shut down. Like, I said too much, and now Maya's asking a couple. So no, I'm good. No, that's not what I meant. Kind of thing. So it's a very delicate conversation if kids start to go that way.
I would say criminal behavior, like anything that's definitely criminal, where they are at risk of consequences that will affect the rest of their lives, knowingly or unknowingly. And then child abuse or abusive behavior, where that they have either hurt someone or someone hurts them, and there are some issues around that, because it's not often the whole story that you'll hear. You'll just hear their experience of it. And then drug use or drug abuse, I think, is something that should definitely be escalated. So at least on top of suicide or self-mutilation, anything, definitely criminal, drug use, and then abuse in the home, or abuse, in any context regarding, where they feel that they are themselves in danger, immediate danger.
Yeah, and the criminal activity is a good one that I didn't mention. The abuse one kind of comes under that bigger umbrella for me, but you're right, it's a little different and should be called out that way. Yeah. Any other questions on that?
What if, I have a question, so what if the kids have kind of conflict with their parents? So they don't want their parents to know what their problem then. Still, we should let their parents know, or?
Well, so this is the difficult thing, because we know all youth workers, really any other adult that comes in contact with my daughter, is my partner in raising my daughter, right? So there are a lot of people who influence my kids over the course of the day that I've trusted my kid to be influenced by, right? And so you have to view your interactions with those children as kind of partnering with their parents. So, in a situation where I don't want my mom and dad to know, I would still use that same lens that Francisco just laid out there, right? And so it's not just about breaking confidence to other youth workers, but it's to their parent. And the first, and I think at that point, then the conversation comes to Francisco, and it's like, hey, this is what I've heard. What kid doesn't at some point doesn't like their parents, right? And so, you're gonna get that, and a lot of times kids will come to you as a place where they can vent about their parents, right? And their opinion often is very subjective, and my dad is the worst, Eliana, we've done it, it's just like, oh, Dad, I hate you so much. And she, so I mean, those types of things, sometimes, like Francisco said, it's just about listening to kids as they vent, but you still have to have that discerning ear, using that same category of activities and themes to determine. So it's in therapy, it's, we talk about, there's no therapist cookbook, right? There's no, when you have a person with schizophrenia and they do this, and for me, when you have a child with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, and this is how they present, do these three things. You always want to be able, I view every kid that I've worked with, even though I've worked with hundreds of kids with autism, you view everyone differently. And there's certain things that I know can work, but I don't automatically prescribe them because of their diagnoses. And so you want to do the same thing with kids, right? You don't come in with, you have some tools and approaches that you've used, and over time you found out they are effective, but you want to approach every situation as if it's your first time going through it, so that you're able to discern, so that you're able to hear effectively, so that you're able to separate objective from subjective. And so it takes a lot of work, and that comes from really having an authentic relationship with those kids. Now, if Johnny said this, it'd be an issue. But I know Susie well enough to know if Susie can say the same thing Johnny just said, and it's not an issue, because I kind of know how Susie rolls, and she rolls much differently than Johnny does, right? So it's really getting to know your kids, and that's why the consistency and hanging out and having small conversations and those types of things. The other thing that I think leads into this a little bit, if we can just shift to the next section around just kind of a poker face, is...
Can I just pause for this?
Yeah.
So if for our policy, our process, if it's something that they tell you that they don't want their parents to know, you're welcome to come to me, and then we can approach the parent together. Or and sometimes I have some insights into that. So oftentimes the kids won't know that their parents already know, and we'll have advanced information about that. So we kind of, if I know about it, but I'm not at liberty to say, then we're kind of waiting for it to surface, then so that we can help them, because we won't be able to help them until they want it to surface, until they want to share. So if something like that comes up, you can show me, then we'll approach the parent, and then if need be, if it really is an issue, and then from there we'll decide, the parent usually will tell us if they want everyone to know so that they can help their child. Like some parents are like that. Well, yeah, everyone should know so that they're prepared. Or other parents would say, no, I don't want anyone to know. We're going to handle this ourselves. Nobody talk about it anymore. And we have to defer to them on that.
And sometimes it's about parent embarrassment, which you hope is not the issue.
Right.
And you hope the issue is, I know as their parent, I know the best way that this should be handled so that we're not doing harm along the way. We're not making it worse, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I would always say the rule of thumb is be honest with kids. They can see BS coming, and the point where you tell a kid, I'm not going to tell anybody, and then you turn around and tell somebody, you've blown it with that kid. And so your answer's got to be, I care about you. I'm glad you trust me, but I can't promise you I won't tell anybody because I care about you. And there's a lot of people who do. And so I welcome you to tell me, but I can't promise you I won't tell anybody else, depending on what it is. Mm-hmm. You would rather say that than to flub that statement to get more information. Now you either got to break the confidence. So these kids know. They're going to say it. Maybe they're not, okay, well, never mind that. I won't tell you now. Okay, well, I'm here. I want you to know I care about you. I'm here. Anytime you want to talk about it, and then, there's been times where different youth workers do it different ways with different kids. Okay, if you don't want to talk about it, I need to ask you a question. You're not, are you thinking, is everything okay? Mm-hmm. Are you thinking about doing any harm to yourself? Are you thinking about, and they're like, no, it's not, so that really, and that's what makes working with youth so difficult is, there's so many variables that determine how much you can push a kid for that kind of stuff, and how you say it to them, and so that's one thing I would just say. And then, like Francisco said, bring it to him, especially if they didn't tell you. Like, then it's like, okay, Susie came to me and said she wanted to tell me something, but when I promised her I wouldn't tell anybody, she didn't tell me. So Francisco, I just want you to be aware of that. I don't feel like I'm breaking any confidences here because she didn't give me any content, but so and then you kind of two heads are better than one in that situation, right? So so this kind of goes to this notion of poker face. Never be shocked. One of the things I was talking to Francisco when we talked about this, and you're gonna hear you may, and I shouldn't say you're gonna, you may hear things that are very shocking. You may hear, you're like, oh my gosh, she's only 11. That's what she's dealing with, or oh my gosh, that's what she did, or and so what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to internalize that, because your reaction is going to be your reaction, and you have to know how to respond in a way that doesn't make them now shut down. I told him I tried weed, and I could just see the look in his face. He started sweating, and he's like, I'm not going to talk to him about it. So it's like, so you want again, in the context of authentic relationship, you want your reaction to be authentic always, because the deeper you go with kids, the more they can see if you're BSing. And so, so you want to suspend disbelief and suspend shock, and kind of I think Francisco might have even said it here, kind of understate your reaction. Because if you just let it be like, okay, she just told me this and I'm just going to have a poker face, well, then it shows that you may not care, right? And so you want to make sure that you show your concern, but the minute you overreact, kids kind of will begin to pull back. Or kids can, I shouldn't say, I don't want to be prescriptive, kids can begin to pull back. I was thinking about telling him about this, but when I just told him chapter 1 intro, he did not seem like he's ready for chapter 2. And so what does that look like with kids? And so so you want to be able to hold your shock, and allow that to be a time for conversation. I've witnessed that be very effective in getting to some deeper things with some youth. So again, the competency and honesty, that's where in trying to make them more comfortable, oh yeah, I know how you feel. Well, no, you don't. You've never lost your mom.
Right.
Well, no, you don't. You're not thinking about homosexuality, So be careful about I know how you feel if you haven't been there yourself. And if you have been there yourself, be willing to share. Make yourself a little vulnerable. What? When I was 13, I used to feel the same way. So I know exactly that at that point, and you can say it with conviction, I know exactly how you feel. Because here's part of my story. And I think children, so much is gained in authentic relationship through story. Be willing to share your story if you've journeyed there as well, right? So you have your own filters that you would share. But if you're going to say you can relate, be okay with telling kids how you can relate, because everyone's like, oh, I know how you feel. I can relate. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to say. You're my youth leader. Can you really relate? Well, yeah, I can. I lost my dad. He used to beat me, and so I know what you're going. So those types of things. So that's what we were saying here. Kind of just being honest in your competency, what you can deal with, what you've gone through yourself, how you can relate. Don't use those as buzzwords to get closer to kids, because they might call you on that. Actually, I made a mistake that way once. I was like, I said, no, I know how you feel. And the kid said, do you? Really? Where'd you grow up? I was like, Western New York, town of 45,000 people. I did not grow up on the Lower East Side. No, you're right. So that was not my challenge growing up. And when I began to talk to youth, I was like, look, I did not grow up in Castle Hill. So that wasn't but here are some things that you're saying to me that I understand. Here are some things so just be able to suspend shock and disbelief. Oh my gosh, you did? That doesn't help. And then remember some of these other things, just react authentically, but temper your reaction. Be honest with kids. Don't try to be in places where you're not competent, conversations that you're not competent in having. And then, I don't know what we said here about the goal, Francisco. Do you remember what we were? Yeah, just you want to be able to draw. At the end of the day, you want to draw the story from the youth in a way that they feel safe in sharing with you. So that's the goal. You want to allow youth to get. You want them to bring you into their journey of being a teen, because we've all been there, right? And so when they're looking to reach out to somebody other than their parents, you want them to think of the youth pastor, not the teacher in school or the cool guy in the playground that's there, playing ball with the kids. This is where we want our kids to turn to those who have the perspective of Christianity as guidance. And so the cool youth worker is where you want them to turn, right? And you'll find a good youth worker, whether faith-based or not, will be there every time the kid turns. And that's hard. I was talking to Francisco. for me to talk to youth workers and say, hey, Marcus, how was it? I had to go down to the police station at 2:00 in the morning. He got arrested. He didn't want to call his mom. He called me. What am I supposed to do? And you don't just always be that get out of jail free card. I mean, now it prompts him into conversation with that kid on the way home. Look, bro, I'm here, but we can't keep. I can go to your mom with you. I can help you have that conversation with your mom, but we need to talk to your mom about this. This is maybe it's the first time I've found out. This is the third time I've had to pick you up because you've been hanging out on the block late, sneaking out, whatever it is. So, so that's important. That's really important, just to make sure that you're able to do that. Hemorrhaging. This is the term I had heard from a couple of my youth workers that really made sense. Oftentimes, when youth are coming to you, especially when it's outside of the context of good relationship, they've hemorrhaged. They've held it in for so long that it's just blah, right? It just comes out. And consider it very serious if they've shared stuff with you that you don't think you have the context and relationship where they would have shared it. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, he just told me a lot and I barely know him. Mm-hmm. We haven't rolled like that for, he's been coming a couple times and he's already. And so that's usually a sign that this is a bigger deal, because he wasn't waiting for a relationship to deepen. He needed someone to tell today. Yeah. So just look for those types of situations. On the surface, it's, the other thing I would say is on the surface, it's acting up. It's when I was a therapist in the school, the kid who acted up in school and the behaviors came out, there was something else going on at home. It wasn't just he's a bad kid in class. That was his expression of what was going on at home or going on inside. And so, the risky behaviors that you're seeing, the self-destructive behaviors that you might be seeing, that's a sign that there's possibly some bigger stuff going on. And so just keep a lookout for those types of things. On the surface, everything kind of looks together. You can realize that under the surface, things have gotten pretty bad. And then, like I said, this is not textbook, right? I'm speaking in generalities, but I'm hoping to give you some insight into some of the situations that could turn out to be bad situations.
I'll say just one thing on that, because this was a mistake that I made when I first came. I'd not been in youth ministry in sort of this dedicated pastoral role for very long. Usually in youth ministry, I would get involved in project-based activities, like we were going to do a youth outreach concert, or we were going to go to camp or go on a mission trip. And so I was always a part of these activities with a set beginning and end. Mm-hmm. And I developed a lot of relationships along the way and maintained those, and but I didn't have to do them within the context of youth ministry. So when I was first approached with some difficult issues, I took them all on my shoulders, like, the parents don't know how to do this, and I talked with other people, nobody else knows what to do with this, so I guess it's all on me. And I would be on the phone with certain youth till like 11 o'clock at night, and it's been like a 2-hour call, and there's no need for it, but I didn't know where to take it or what to do with it or where to set my own boundaries with that youth. So when these things come up, there's already been a breach of boundaries in that kid's life, and what they don't need is another person who has no boundaries in their life adding to that problem. So what they will do is they will take everything that they're going through and they will just shoot it at you like a fire hose, because they just want to get rid of it. And you have to be careful, because emotionally you may think you can take it, but it takes a toll. So the best thing to do is to not take that all on your own, but to engage other people right away. So if someone is hemorrhaging, like this, where there's this big buildup of emotions or hurt or pain, and it's coming at you, we have to create, like a boundary for that. We have to create a reservoir. We have to have a plan, because that takes the emotional weight off of us and makes us more effective in that scenario. So as soon as you start to feel like it's on your shoulders, that's when we have to reach out to somebody else.
And that establishing of boundaries even on the beginning of relationship with youth. So what you don't want to do is you've got 20 kids in the room and all the youth workers go around and state what their boundaries are, right? That's not what we're looking for. But as you begin to journey with some kids and you have relationship where they can begin to respect boundaries and care about you as a person, we're like, okay, here, all right, we've been hanging pretty tight for a while here. Let's just set up some boundaries so that I'm as effective as I can be. You have an understanding of how we're gonna relate, and so as a youth worker, being able to set up boundaries, and being able to know when to stop a conversation. Like, okay, we've been talking for an hour here. It's 11 o'clock at night. Are you okay tonight? Let's pick this up tomorrow. I need to go to bed. I got to be at work tomorrow, or I got to go eat dinner with my kids. Or I got to, and so being to know, so youth know, I'm cool, Francisco, but I got to respect, if I just need someone to talk to, and I'm okay tonight, yeah, we can finish talking tomorrow. You go do you, kind of thing. So it's important, even in setting up boundaries, that you do it at the right time in a situation where you can kind of discern where this might go and say, like, because what you don't want to do is set up boundaries when they're hemorrhaging, when they're like, or when they really need somebody. That's not the time you say, okay, but that's the time you say, okay, are you okay? Because remember what we talked about. If you're okay, it's 11 o'clock. Can we talk? Can we connect tomorrow? You're okay till after school tomorrow, kind of things. If not, we can talk about it, because you don't want someone to hang up the phone unresolved and then go do something to themselves or to be in a worse place, and you've done harm because you thought there was an understanding of respect of your time. But to be able to, when you begin to journey with kids that way, to be able to say, okay, let's set up, it's just like any other, let's set up some ground rules here, okay? Anytime you need to talk to me, especially if it's an emergency, pick up the phone and call me, I'm there. You need someone to talk to, I'm there. If I can't talk, we'll set up a time where we can. If it can't wait, then I'll, you just kind of set that type of stuff up. Once you get to the point where, this kid's kind of connecting to me, I think he needs me to be here for him as he goes through some stuff, and I'm opting in. That's when you kind of begin to establish the rules of the relationship. So, I don't know. I think that's kind of it on that one. Any questions? Is that the last one?
Yeah, I think so. It's the last one.
So, yeah, so that's, it's not a science, it's an art, and I appreciate anyone who determines that they want to pour into kids, especially for the kingdom, right? So, we all know that, Christian or not, we've all were teenagers.
Yeah.
We know how difficult it can be. I'm working with my nephew now. He's my sister's a single mom, two children, lives in Charlotte, got a 16-year-old who is swimming upstream in his faith. Actually, he's questioning his faith right now because of some of the things that he doesn't feel he can answer, and so I'm journeying with him now from really over the phone, and just doesn't have a dad in his life, and so really leaning in, and but from the very first conversation, I just let it know, the stuff he's struggling with. I just came out with my stuff. I was like, bro, I was 16 once. Let me tell you what I went through, and let me tell you when this happened for me, and let me tell you what I was like in college, and because he's struggling with some of the same stuff that 16-year-old boys would be struggling with, trying to do the right thing, but good-looking brother who has a lot of girls that are interested in, and so just kind of talking with him through that kind of stuff. He's got a good head on his shoulders, but it's still, I've decided, Terrence, here's my phone number. You need me, call your uncle. Call Uncle Rod anytime you need to, right? And then I think the other thing that I've got to remember in my busyness is to not let it be a conversation every 2 weeks. I talked to him last Sunday, and then I didn't connect with him for a while, and I texted him. I knew he was in school. I was like, hey, it's Uncle Ross. Sorry, I didn't reach back out to you. Been busy. Want to know how it went with your girlfriend you just broke up with. And so he sent me the text back. Thanks, Uncle Ross. I love you too. So it's just, I got to be consistent. And it's hard because he's not my kid. He's in Charlotte. I don't see him. But now, I'm one of the guys that he's kind of leaning into. And so I've almost got to put it on my calendar, check in with Terrence. So those are the types of things. Once you say, I'm going to be that dude in his life, I got to hold myself accountable to it. And that's the consistency and the authenticity that he's going to really appreciate.
My question is, what do you do if it's the other way around, when it's the parent confiding in you. I mean, I already had two parents that started telling me things that was going on with their child that actually shocked me. So now when I see the child, I'm like, oh my God, like, I know you're going through something and I can't say anything because then you're going to say I'm siding with your parent, so.
Yeah, I think in that situation, you try to, this is me, it's not prescriptive. If I'm working with a kid or that is going through stuff, I continue to try to deepen my relationship with that child.
But not let them know that you know.
No, because, I mean, now the parent, I don't know the situation, but the parent is trusting me to pour into their kid through this youth ministry and giving me some information that might help me to understand their child better. And so it's hard to not allow that information to change your perspective and interaction with that child. But if I know a kid's going through something, I'm just going to continue to make myself available and watch out for any worsening of that scenario. So now I kind of have a third eye on, okay, mom says she's kind of struggling through some stuff. That gives me the lens through which I should be viewing some of the stuff she's doing. And if I see it getting worse in this environment, then I've got to partner with mom and dad to intervene. That's a great question. Actually, I've never been asked that question. So that's what's coming off the top. That's how I would interact. That's how I would do it. Francisco, I don't know if you have any different or further guidance.
Sure, I'd like to offer that. Actually, I think this only happens when you're when you actually kind of get to a deep place with someone where you start to question the line between the way you feel about what someone's doing and the way they feel about what they're doing. For instance, it's not uncommon for a teenager to say to their parents, "It's not that bad," right? And so their perspective on what they're doing or what's happening is very different from the parent who sees this child's life, quickly turning left and then going off a cliff. Like that's all they see is that potential, worst case scenario. And so the parent has a perspective on it that the youth may not share. And so at least to help you separate the feelings and the concerns of the parent from the youth is just to know that the parent's perspective on it is absolutely going to be different from the youth's perspective on it because they're just different people. And I'm sure they share a lot of the same values, but a 13-year-old is not going to look at staying out late the same way a parent's going to look at staying out late.
Right.
And so and that goes into the deeper things as well, like who they're dating or where their grades are, or other behaviors. You can insert almost anything there, and that's part of adolescence, is internalizing the things that the parents think about or value for themselves, so that they actually start to become more mature and adult, in their thinking about what's happening. So when, at least for interacting with the youth, I would say just remember the way parents feel about it and the way kids feel about it or youth feel about it was automatically going to be different. So don't assume that everything that's making the parent, fall apart is making the youth fall apart in the same way. That's first.
So you're saying if the parent is just wanting to vent?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they genuinely want help. They don't know what to do, and for some parents, talking about it helps them process it. Like they say things like, "I'm thinking about doing this." It helps for them to have said that because before it was just in their head, and then once they say, "Oh, I'm thinking about calling the police," and then they're like, "Wait, no, I would never do that," or "I'm thinking about going to that other kid's house and telling the parents such and such." As soon as they're thinking about it, it's okay once it's in their mind, but as soon as they say it out loud, then they say, "Well, yeah, that would be crazy. I'm not going to do that."
Yeah, and the other thing I think you'll see sometimes is parents kind of test their hypothesis with people who are supposed to know kids.
Right.
Right. So I'm a first-time parent. I know how my parents handle it. I didn't really like the way they did. Let me throw it out there to Maya and see how. Something about calling the cops. And you might say, "Well, is it really seriously? It's called the cops." I mean, or you said to a parent, well, do you want my opinion on that? And a parent was like, yeah, please, what would you do? And so you don't want to become a counselor for parents, right? You don't want to help. But I mean, there are times where I've seen parents kind of put it out there to test it, to see if their action is the right one. And youth workers will actually invite themselves, because now I have a different perspective on Johnny, and and so do you want my opinion on that? Well, I don't. So then it gives you the ability to kind of engage the parent a little deeper. I think the one I would do, having paused and letting Francisco speak, what would I do if I was a parent and I just told you? The next time it came up at home and I engaged my daughter or my child in the conversation, I would say, have you talked to anybody? Have you talked to any youth workers about this? I know you kind of. So I would invite them to talk to their youth worker about. So I don't know that I met you when Eliana moved in this group, but I met you. I introduced myself to you. Yeah. This is Eliana. My daughter's going to be coming. Yeah. So my, just by default, it's kind of like I know Maya. So if something came up, and we haven't talked much at all, but I was like, hey, you're the female youth worker that I met. I'm going to aim Eliana at you, right? So It was kind of like, so if something came up, I'd say, you know what, have you talked to anybody about it? I said, talk to Maya. I know she probably has a pretty good opinion on it. And I was like, is that something you want to do? And she's like, yeah, maybe I will. I would, knowing my daughter, the next time I saw you, I might even walk over with Eliana and be like, hey, Maya, how's it going? Ellie and I were talking about some stuff at home. She's probably going to talk to you about it. I'd say it right in front of her. Like, I'd hold her accountable to the fact that she just said to me at home she wanted to talk to you about it. And so I'd put it on your radar screen officially that way, right? I've already told you unofficially because you said I've come to you and complained to something. I've mentioned something to you, but Eliana doesn't know I've mentioned it to you. Now I'm kind of putting it out there. Eliana and I talked about this thing, and she might talk to you about it. That lets you know, okay, now I'm officially in the conversation, in the process with Rahsaan.
All right, but then this is where I start to lose the confidence, because I don't feel like I have an accounting degree, I'm only volunteering here. Do I have, what I say verbally, is it correct? Should I be actually saying something correct? Because I don't have training and
yeah, but at that point,
and that's when I start to think, should I really be listening to this? Should I really be doing this? And then I start to worry that I may say something wrong.
Sure. Can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm in your position, because I've been in that position, where I was approached with something I not experienced personally or had any training on. I mean, it's great to express that. That's how you actually develop more trust by saying, I can, we're going to be talking about this issue and it's very deep and important. I can see that it burdens you. I have to let you know I've not experienced anything like that. I'm here to listen to you, but if you want help with this, then I will be glad to see what we can do or what I can do to help you find the right kind of help or find someone with this experience. Absolutely. Or find some information on this. And then, that's where, I, the church and network, youth network comes into play. We talk with the parent, we try to set up counseling, or we talk to the youth in a different context, or, maybe we set up some type of action plan, or we try to help move toward an action plan rather than just conversation or dialogue around something that needs a plan to be resolved. But, right now it's just strife or struggle for the family. So be upfront, say, I want to hear you, I want to listen, but you have to know upfront that I may not be the person who can help you, though I'm the person who can listen to you. So that's honest, and they may just want that. They may say, well, that's really all I need. I don't really need help. I just need someone to hear this because I don't want to feel like I'm alone. So that's what, like Rahsaan said, knowing your competency and being honest. And if you come up with that right in front, right in the beginning, it changes the tone of the conversation from I'm so worried about this to where should I be going for help, on this issue? Because I thought I was going to get help here, but I still have to seek out that help somewhere else. So, yeah, and I'm always there as a first line resort. If you've overheard something or you've heard something and you've even given advice, beyond your experience, which I've done as well. You make every mistake, and when you're in ministry and you
I
keep
didn't
going
give
forward.
advice. I just said that maybe the problems that she had, we can raise up as topics within the group and discussions. That's
Sure.
all. I said that's the most I can probably suggest to Francisco. That's what I told her.
Right.
This is, what her concerns are, really should be concerns of other youth too that may not be saying it.
Right. And again, saying that is one of the things that parents need to hear, that they may not be alone. Their child may not be, the only one on this path to destruction, that as they envision it. It's not actually true,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. So, up until this point, you've heard my perspective to you as the parent. Hey, just want you to know Eliana's X, Y, and Z. Right? So you haven't said anything. Now I've come to you and said, hey, Ellie and I talked about something, and she's going to bring it to you. Now okay, I'm officially in. Everybody knows I'm in the process. This will be the first time you hear Eliana's perspective on it, right? And it even can give you, depending on how you have the conversation, it will even give you the opportunity to kind of ask some questions to test mom and dad's perspective. So that's good. Well, I'm not fully, can I ask a couple questions? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Is that, again, it really depends on the type of relationship you have, but you can ask some probing conversations to see, okay, mom's perspective and Eliana's perspective are just way off here from my understanding of what's happening. But then it does give you the ability to say, wow, Rahsaan had some concerns with Eliana. His concerns sound pretty legit.
Right. You're talking about concerns about hurting themselves, but what about if the person says they want to run away and they want to leave? Yeah. What do you do with something like that?
Yeah, so I would do the same thing on that situation as well. I would engage them in conversation. Listen twice as much as you talk. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So listen twice as much as you talk. And if it was nothing that was, again, it's kind of one of those, can you keep a secret? Like, well, no, I can't promise you I can keep secret. And then like Francisco said, you come to him and say, I don't know if I can do anything to help, but I think this is a situation where we might want to bring somebody else in that's just qualified to help better than I can. I love you. I will always be here for you to talk to, but let's get some other people involved, because at the end of the day, we want to solve the situation,
I think Rahsaan mentioned earlier also that they share chapter 1, and then like chapter 2 is what they really want to share, but they're testing it. So let's say running away just as a topic, because when I was 12 years old, I made a plan and I executed it.
My girlfriends did it and they got to the corner.
Yeah, I got I think I got 100 feet, maybe. Like I jumped the backyard fence and then I went down and like my dad didn't call me to come home. He's like, and he saw me leave. I said, I'm running away, right? And I had everything. So my dad, he said, come back, like one time. And that was it. And I was like, oh, that's not how I thought that would go.
Like, now what do I do? I've crossed the street. I got no money.
Yeah. And he just said it one time. He must not really be concerned. So, it's like, maybe I'm not ready for this. And so I was like, I think I was 12 years old. But that the very same, that and it's important that we hear those topics, because, and like you said, like mentioning them in our youth group is a really good idea. And in fact, I try to connect with parents at least on a quarterly basis and just talk about what's going on. And occasionally, like if there's a death in the family, then the parents are saying, really we would like the hope of Christ to be highlighted in our youth group. That there's life after death, kind of. Because my child's having a really hard time without their grandmother, but without his or her grandmother, and just having a hard time finding hope, and so we can get to those issues in through the back door, and also I again we have to go on a kind of case by case basis, and some parents are more prepared than others for those things, and we have to just gauge with what kind of how prepared the parent is, how prepared the youth is, and how prepared we are, and we can't step out of what we're prepared to do. That's the first thing.
There's and I'll close on that part and give you guys rest. There are just so many variables at play with every child. Psychosocial maturity, social emotional maturity, resiliency, environment, relationship with parents, relationship with siblings, discipline, means of discipline in the home, responsibility there's just, you name it, there are just so many different variables that make my child who she character, the way she processes her experiences with failure, her insecurities or lack thereof, and so there are just so many things that make her who she. That's the exciting thing about us being creation, right? Everyone is so different, and it's not because of our physical appearance. That's the least of the differences. It's all the other stuff that makes us who we are, and so that's why you can't script this stuff. Yeah. And until you have authentic, deep relationship where you can know the nuances of all those variables, that's what's going to help you make the right decisions. So, some kids you can call their bluff. I've seen, I'm going to run away. Dude, you are not going to run away. You wouldn't say that with the next kid who walks in. The next kid that walks in the door might be like, oh, nobody believes me. I'm going to, it really depends on, what type of, do I know these kids? Well, please, you're going to run away? I was like, how can you say that to him, Denise? She's like, I know him. He's not going to. Dude, you are not going to. Go put your bag back. It's that kind of thing where you can connect with kids because I know him. I know that's not going to do more harm. That's actually going to help him. Stop the BS. You're not going to run away. Go put your bag back and let's call your mom and she'll come down and we'll talk and this will be behind us. We'll squash it, right? That works with some kids. With some kids, you would be doing harm, right? And so it's just all of those variables that you need to figure out around your kids. It comes from just getting to know them. And so that's why youth ministry is it's really important. It's and I said to Francisco, I was like, your youth leaders need to know, how serious are they about pouring in the lives of kids? Because you can't just bounce when it gets too tough, right? Yeah. So anyway.
So thank you for that, Rahsaan.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. You were listening to Poise and Integrity, a conversation with Rahsaan Graham, featuring also the leaders of our Conquest program, the youth ministries at Trinity Baptist Church in Manhattan. We hope this has been informative and helpful for you, and we pray God bless you and your family.